Hello guys, I'm Steve. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. If it's your first time stopping by the channel, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't regret it. You're a returning subscriber as always, guys. Welcome back, and I do appreciate the support. Guys, we got some breaking news out of New Orleans, Louisiana, where they ride every day of the week. You understand? Shout out New Orleans. And we're exactly 6 weeks from the day that 10 inmates escaped from the New Orleans, Louisiana Justice Center in a jailbreak of all jailbreaks. Most of them were caught, except 2. Antione Massey, the internet sensation that went on there and proclaimed his innocence on an Instagram feed, but failed to turn himself in. And Derek Groves, the guy that was sentenced for supposedly a quadruple homicide, and he's still on the run. Both of these 2 people, you know, they were looking for him, and with breaking news, I say to you today, Antione Massey has just been arrested. And what's crazy is he got arrested a mile and a half away from the jail that he broke out of, hiding out. Now, they said he was arrested without no type of resistance. Once they had him, he peacefully surrendered once he was surrounded. This is what they know so far.
Antione Massey, who has been known for making social media posts as he's been on the run. He was one of the 10 inmates who escaped from the Orleans Justice Center several weeks ago now. He and Derek Groves were the only 2 remaining still on the run. But this afternoon, we have learned at WWL Louisiana that Antione Massey has been recaptured. We just got off the phone moments ago with the U.S. Marshal's Office. They confirmed to us here at WWL Louisiana that he is, in fact, back in custody, that he was taken back into custody in the Holly Grove neighborhood. And investigative reporter Mike Pearlstein is joining me on the set this afternoon. You just got off the phone with them. Tell me what else you know. This happened in Holly Grove, as I mentioned?
Right, in the 9400 block of Strolitz, not far from the Costco on the way to Metairie Road. This was all within the past hour, so this is very fresh news and information. Antione Massey was found inside of a residence. He was alone. According to Brian Fair of the U.S. Marshal Service, he was captured without incident. In fact, he gave himself up once surrounded by law enforcement. This actually came from a Crime Stoppers tip, Katie. So we know that a $50,000 reward had been offered for some weeks now. They had been waiting on tips, in fact, pursuing some of them unsuccessfully until today. This tip panned out. Somebody will be collecting $50,000. It came through Crime Stoppers. Other agencies involved, the U.S. Marshals were kind of leading the search, but instrumental and at this residence were representatives of the New Orleans Police Department, Louisiana State Police, U.S. Marshals, of course, along with JPSO, not far from the Jefferson Parish border.
That's right on the line.
They assisted. Obviously, they were taking, no chances or risks with these. This particular escaped inmate being considered potentially armed, potentially dangerous, but it ended peacefully. He's now back in custody. Obviously, he'll be facing a charge of escape in addition to the previous charges for which he was being held at the Orleans Justice Center of domestic violence that included rape.
Yes, absolutely. Now, this area that we were looking at on your screen, this is a map where that house is, where Antione Massey, one of the Orleans Justice Center escapees, was taken back into custody. If you're just joining us, that happened just a few moments ago. This area is really not too far from Xavier University's campus, which may be a bit unnerving for some parents out there who may be watching this, to know that Antione Massey was hiding out in a house right there, not that far from the Costco where a lot of people frequent. Hundreds, thousands of people go through that Costco every day. And apparently Antione Massey did not get far when they escaped from the Orleans Justice Center, and remember, all 10 of them.
It was kind of assumed in the case of Antione Massey in particular that he may not have gone far. We saw that previously he posted a video of himself on social media that was identified as a house near the fairgrounds, which was promptly descended upon by the law enforcement agencies. He had not been there, so assume that whenever he videotaped that, It was sometime earlier before he posted it, but that gave them an idea that he probably had not fled across state lines or anything further. What is interesting, we've seen in many of these other escapees, accomplices arrested, booked with accessory to the escape. Right now, no such other people known to be involved in helping him, assisting him. Nobody was at that house in that Holly Grove area when they descended upon it to make that arrest. He gave himself up peacefully. Now, of course, we'll see once they debrief Antoine Massey if he provides any additional information. He was considered, Katie, one of the masterminds
yes, I mean,
of
we learned
the
that.
escape.
We learned that, yes, through the fact that they've arrested several other people, and so that has given us a bit of a paper trail as we've continued to cover this.
And he's been perhaps the most visible by popping up on social media. There had been many tips generated about his whereabouts, including the one himself going on social media. They were able to pinpoint a house there. It's now almost 6 weeks since that escape. It is really considered remarkable that Massey up until today and Derek Groves, the other escapees still at large, managed to stay out for so long with such a large reward being offered.
Apparently one tip is all it took.
That's right, and that is always the kind of mystery of being a fugitive. How many people know of the whereabouts? Who did he trust? Well, apparently, I don't know if it was him letting his guard down or somebody deciding 50,000 was just too tempting to pass up, but it was in fact a Crime Stoppers tip. And Brian Fair, the spokesman for the U.S. Marshal Service, said that reward will be collected by the tipster.
Yeah, well, obviously there's still a $50,000 reward for information out for Derek Groves. He's considered the other mastermind behind this operation. We do know that Groves had an ex-girlfriend who was actually an employee at the jail, correct?
Right. She was a guard.
And she was a guard at one point, has since been fired. However, that's the only person that we've known with ties to Groves. Now, if he and Massey were the two who coordinated this escape, there are going to be a lot of questions, asked and hopefully answered by Massey now that he's in custody.
And certainly, the more that time passed from that May 16th escape, the more the law enforcement was operating on the theory that the escaped inmates had gone their separate ways. They were no longer, say, together in hiding. The last pair were the two arrested in Texas. They got the furthest of anyone we know so far. And they were together in a car, arrested by authorities in Texas. But everyone else had been arrested separately. Generally, if you're going to cover your tracks and remain in hiding, the fewer people that know, the better.
Sure.
Acting in concert with another person could also put them in jeopardy of being caught.
Yes.
Massey was again caught in that 9400 block of Strolitz in Holly Grove by himself in a residence, and that's generally, it's almost kind of on the edge of Lakeview on the way to Metairie Road. You could describe it as behind the Costco. A relatively peaceful residential neighborhood.
Yeah, not really Lakeview, but uptown. It's closer to Holly Grove, borders uptown,
right.
And other areas like that. Now, just a few moments ago, you were looking at a booking photo for one of the plumbers who was working at the jail, who has been accused of helping these inmates escape. Now, that affidavit in his arrest is where we got a tremendous amount of information about how this breakout happened. And that's when we first learned that Massey and Groves may have been the two that were the ringleaders behind this, and that they had been working together, that they had confronted this plumber allegedly. Plumber now tells a different story through his attorney, so all of those details are going to play out in court. I think that's when we're finally going to figure out exactly what happened, but you would assume that the U.S. Marshal's Office, the NOPD, every law enforcement agency, Louisiana State Police, which Troop NOLA has been essential in all of this, that they are all questioning Massey, that they are going to try and get as much information out of him as possible about, number one, how this went down, and number two, where Derek Groves might be.
And you mentioned in the case of the Sterling Williams, the maintenance man at the jail who was arrested, and in fact he was the first of the non-escapees, to be arrested as a helping or an accomplice.
Yes.
And the initial account, I'm glad you used the word allegedly, because that's now in some dispute by his own attorney, but his allegation that he told detectives at the time of his arrest was that he was threatened with a shank, a crude homemade prison knife, that under that threat he turned off the water so that the inmates could crawl through a hole that they, I guess, punched through a wall of an empty cell behind a toilet and sink fixture. Later, once he got to court, his attorney gave a different account, that it was a matter of a plumbing issue and maintenance that led to him turning off the water.
He even said he was not threatened with a shank by these two inmates. That's what the lawyer said in court once Sterling Williams went to court. So this is definitely in dispute, not completely 100% fact at this point, but that is what law enforcement believed, and that is what was contained in that arrest affidavit.
But we do know, obviously, Antione Massey was vocal by, and obviously some risk there on going on social media, giving a lengthy account in which, as you recall, he said, "I didn't escape, I was let out," led to obviously a whole nother sequence of questions as to who might have been involved. Obviously, Sterling Williams is facing the charges of aiding the escape. Were there others? The Attorney General's office is deep into a criminal investigation into whether there was other inside help. But by all accounts, Antione Massey, he was vocal when he was on that tier prior to all of this. He was vocal when he popped up on that social media claiming innocence in the underlying charges that put him there, domestic violence, up to and including a rape charge, as well as the escape itself. Kind of hard to make that argument while a fugitive on the run when you're not where you're supposed to be in custody. But nevertheless, we heard it, he said it, I didn't escape, I was let out.
Yes, he also has a lengthy rap sheet as well for prior crimes in addition to what he's facing now.
And important to note that among the priors were 2 escapes, one from a jail and one from a juvenile detention center, as well as twice cutting off an electric ankle bracelet when he was out on bail. And so he's considered a 4-time escapee before this.
Which of course raises a lot of questions about the security of the jail, and we've been asking those as this has all played out, about Susan Hudson and whether or not decisions were being made to house these people in a secure enough position that they required, given that 10 of them were able to escape and be undetected for hours when this first all unfolded. Oh,
so many questions, and we have multiple parallel investigations. The AG kind of taking the lead on the criminal investigation into whether there was other inside help. But they, as we know from the very beginning, going over all of the video from inside the jail, that tier in particular, going and listening to the recorded telephone conversations that the inmates can make, when they're locked up. And that has actually led to a lot of, relevant clues and tips, unknown if that played a role in Massey, but I understand it was just a tip that finally came that pinpointed his location. They acted on it quickly here, middle of the afternoon on a Friday in an otherwise peaceful residential neighborhood. And now we turn our attention to the one remaining escapee, Derrick Rose.
We do, yes, and we're going to talk a lot more about him in just a few minutes, but this has really been a game of whack-a-mole with trying to find these inmates. They have descended on location after location after location, and this afternoon, as we know and as we've been reporting, we now know that Antione Massey was taken into custody on Strelitz Street. Amelia Strahan is at the scene. She's joining us live now with the latest on what's happening out there. Amelia, I imagine there's a very heavy law enforcement presence, or at least there was.
Yeah, Katie, I believe there was. It has mostly cleared out from what we can see here from the 9400 block of Strolitz Street. We're told Antoine Massey's around 6 weeks on the run have come to a close now. And we actually checked the distance from Orleans Justice Center, and we're only about 1.5 miles away. So after over a month on the run, he was located here on Strolitz Street in the Holly Grove neighborhood. We're told multiple law enforcement agencies were involved in this arrest. We're also told that he did not put up any kind of fight. Now, NOPD is going to have the latest information on this arrest and on the inmates on the run tonight at 5:30. And of course, WWL is going to have our Lily Cummings there. So we'll learn more about how the arrest went down here on Strolitz Street in Holly Grove. Now, that, of course, just leaves Derek Groves left on the run. This makes 9 of the 10 inmates that escaped Orleans Justice Center back in May captured. So now 6 weeks after big development, I believe this is actually 6 weeks to the day or very close to it. And again, found just about 1.5 miles away from the Justice Center. So we're looking forward to learning more details about this arrest. But again, for what we know now, Massey did not put up a fight with law enforcement, and he was arrested here on the 9400 block of Strolitz Street. Like I said, law enforcement appear to have cleared out of this area, but hopefully we'll learn more now that we know there were multiple law enforcement agencies involved. I'm sure when this arrest happened, it was a heavily patrolled area. So as we get those updates, we will keep you updated. And again, this is, around 6 weeks since that escape. So we're looking forward to hearing what the NOPD has to say tonight at 5:30.
Amelia, can you pan around and show us what the neighborhood looks like in that area? I'm just curious if it's just a regular residential neighborhood, or, was he sitting in the middle of a bunch of houses of people who just had no idea that he was in there? I think a lot of people at home might have those same questions. So what does the neighborhood look like where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me step out of the frame really quickly so you guys can kind of get a better look. There are other news crews here as well. Everyone's interested to see what happened here. It looks like a lot of just residential, there's a bunch of houses. There are some people with nicely kept gardens over there. It looks like a really peaceful street. We've seen a few families come in and out of their houses. So it's not exactly the kind of place you would expect someone to hide. It looks very peaceful, very, like a family-friendly area. Like I said, we've seen a few people come in and out, not heavily trafficked. Again, this is Strolitz Street, 9400 block, Holly Grove. Again, very residential area, and it appears to be peaceful right now, Katie.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's a high fence. If that is the correct address, I'm assuming that you're standing in front of, there's a high fence there. Looks like the yard is well kept. It raises all these questions about whether or not he was in an abandoned house, whether or not someone who owned the house knew that he was staying in there. I'm sure those questions are all being asked by law enforcement tonight. But it's very interesting that it's already cleared out. They must have swooped in and cleared out, Amelia.